out. I mean, they were just waiting for somebody to say, it's okay, and
Mhm.
that's, really, just giving somebody permission to just do what they do, is kind of huge, sometimes.
Totally.
And, working at Berkeley, it's, people are, I'm just so lucky, I have the online fiddle school, of course,
Mhm.
which is fantastic because I've got people at every level, and that's been a real educational experience for me, figuring out how to teach beginners. I've had to really consult with a lot of really good teachers who are used to, I've learned a lot just trying to figure out how to work with people that are just starting out.
Mhm.
But, I don't really have much, but being at Berkeley, it's like people that were already pretty much developed,
Right.
people that were already committed to being musicians. That's been the most incredible privilege, I guess. People like, well, Brittany Haas and Natalie Haas to some extent, and well, it just goes, yeah. I don't know. They just keep showing up, and they're just all such wonderful. And there's a lot of love in this for me. I mean, I just really think of them as kind of my kids. I'm the crazy uncle who, just, oh,
Yeah.
I do. Go ahead, do this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, you guys are great.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's an important part of it. Somebody who may have had some success doing something that
Mhm.
is pretty. I guess I mean more and more I don't sound like anybody else in particular. And I don't think that many people care to sound like me, which is great because everybody should sound like themselves. And of course, the violin you can't sound like anybody but yourself. It's
Right.
just the nature of the instrument. You
Mhm.
just have to sound like you.
That's a great line. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's important for a lot of violinists to remember because there's so much. I feel like so many people are waiting for that moment where they finally have a sound. But
Yeah, yeah, they're like, going like, oh yeah, well I'm working on all this stuff, and when is my sound going to,
arrive. Oh, it just arrived.
but you already have it, and it changes. It changes your whole life. Your sound. I mean, God, when I think about some of those early records, well, for instance, Manzanita that I played on, where it sounded just like pretty nervous, a little tight, maybe some good ideas,
Uh-huh.
just,
Yeah.
well, compared to now where it's just all, I just don't really, I've given myself permission to have, just convey all kinds of emotion and make mistakes and stuff.
It's an interesting perspective because I've always thought of you as a very relaxed player, even on those early recordings, I guess that was in the early 80s, but that Man City record.
Yeah,
Um,
well, I'm sure that these are things that, because I focus on my own.
sure, of course.
We all focus on our own playing so much that we hear all the, oh, I remember what was going through my mind. I was worried about God, if they were going to put a parking ticket on my car,
Yeah,
in the studio or something. You can
totally.
hear that stuff if it's you. It's hard for other people.
Right. Well, since you mentioned the fiddle camps, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, um, it's funny. So I'm 33. I'll just tell everyone now. So a lot of people, I would say, of my generation, whatever you call that, um, the 30s, maybe a little bit older than that, maybe a little bit younger than that, we talk about how now we talk about as if we can compare as if we lived like 40, 50 years ago, which is where I'm going with this.
Uh-huh.
But we talk about how now there seems to be so much more pressure, as it were, to play so many different styles. And a lot of this, it could come from the fiddle camp culture where there's so many different styles to choose from
Uh-huh.
at a fiddle camp. Whereas, 80 years ago, you played the music of your region, or that you heard in the house, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm just wondering, like, what was it like for you when you were growing up? Because you play a lot of different genres. So how would you compare the fiddle culture from 40 years ago to what it is now?
Yeah, well, I think, definitely, yeah, 40 years ago or a little earlier when I was, even earlier than that when I was just discovering fiddle, there was definitely, people were pretty embedded in a style, and especially, just the idea that it was traditional. Um, there weren't a lot of, the people that were really playing original stuff, people like Sid Page and Richard Green, were pretty much out in the wilderness.
Hmm.
But the thing was, if you really look at that, I mean, if you go back into country music fiddling, and people like Dale Potter and of course, Howdy Forster and all those guys, all had very distinct sounds,
Hmm.
even though it fell under the rubric of country music, and they might be playing bump 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 bump, and backing up the singer, whatever singer they were
Hmm.
touring with, but. Um, if they got a chance to make their own record, you'd see these, pretty extreme differences in tone and just approach, stylistic approach.
Hmm.
So everybody's, I think that I started like playing electric blues guitar. That's when I got serious about music.
Okay.
And when I heard Richard Green, it was about middle high school. I said, "Man, Richard, he said, he does everything. I already play the violin, so if I put all the blues licks that I knew, and Richard was playing a lot of blues at that time too, because he
Yeah.
was playing a lot of Scott Stoneman material.
Okay.
Who was like totally, like a madman of fiddle, um, and." So I said, yeah, if I can apply all these blues licks I know on the guitar back over to violin, which I had not connected that, you could play that on the violin. I will have a niche because there's nobody in my high school I know that is doing that, and maybe nobody in this my part of California even, or maybe I don't know the world because you don't know, especially back then when you couldn't just get on the internet and just
Hmm.
find out who else is doing what you're doing. But it turned out that I got pretty into the blues style on the violin
Hmm.
even before I picked up bluegrass. But then, of course, bluegrass, oh, it's lots of rhythm and it's fast, everything that like a teenage boy would like.
Right.
Fast,
Yeah.
um, so that became an obsession, and that
Hmm.
because there was contest fiddling, semi-Texas style contest fiddling going on in the middle of California in the state, all up and
Hmm.
down the I-5 corridor. Um, I got into that because there were events. There were like
Hmm.
people would show up at a contest, and it'd be the whole weekend, and that's where I really started finding a community of people that were playing
Hmm.
fiddle. So, but I guess what I'm thinking is that it's really, even though it's important and great, to and good for your if you're, a professional, it's good for your bottom line and just, if you want to get out and play with people, it's good to be able to play a bunch of different
Hmm.
styles because that's how we interact with,
Yeah.
It's also really good to, when you're starting out, to really deeply, deeply, delve into one style. And,
Hmm.
usually at the beginning, that's kind of a good time to do that.
Right.
But you could do it at any time, but we run out of time as we get older. There's all kinds of just the babies, the
Yeah.
busy work, taxes, car insurance, all that stuff is gonna they're everything demands your time. So uh, it's usually better to, but I think just the discipline of like deeply exploring one style in an obsessive way
Hmm.
uh, affects everything else that we do. I think
Hmm.
if you really know one, whether it's bluegrass or Cape Breton style or whatever, um, uh, then it gives you like a place to come from. It gives you
Hmm.
like some kind of grounding. Some place
Sure.
where this is home. This is home. This is where
Yeah.
bottom of then it's easier for you to leave the house if you can come
Right.
back to some place.
So what's home for you, Daryl? What would you say is home for you?
Oh, I think bluegrass and
Hmm.
blues maybe to a lesser extent.
Hmm.
But yeah, bluegrass is music is just it's still to me if I it's the most exciting music in the world for about 8.5 minutes. It's like, amazing. Turn the radio on, guys, it's going. It's like your hair stands up. And, you drive the
Yeah.
car off the road, and
Yeah.
of course, like like a couple more songs. It's like, okay, this is right. This is this is pretty much what bluegrass is, and this is what this is the same stuff,
Uh-huh.
and it's great. And it becomes like you're kind of picking through, looking for people who are, playing it from a very individual play. People who are
Right.
really putting their. You hear them first, and then you hear the style,
Mm.
and that's always, ultimately that's what you want.
Absolutely.
You want. Oh, I recognize that person, and he's playing bluegrass today. Okay, that's cool. Oh man, that's good. Wow, he's doing some swing stuff. That's cool. But that's that guy. It's like Vassar Clements.
Right. Right.
No matter what, who he was playing.
Sounds like Vassar. 100%. Yeah.
24-hour Vassar channel tuned to that station.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Vassar, and because I think of him as kind of the generation before you. Did you have fiddle mentors like Vassar or other people?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I kind of fixated on Richard Green,
Okay.
who sort of took his mentor as Scott Stoneman, I guess, but
Mhm.
still, of course, worked with Bill Monroe.
Yeah.
And, because he was the first fiddle player I heard. He was,
Okay.
like, so you get an imprint there.
Mm.
Richard was incredibly inventive and creative, and played a lot of blues, and by the time I heard him, had already played with Bill Monroe
Mm.
and knew a bunch of that stuff. And I quickly, started discovering other players. I really liked Byron Bernlein, who was a
Mm.
California resident at the time, which
Okay.
was really good because I actually met the guy. I actually went to a big fiddle contest in Central California, and there was Byron standing in the parking lot playing the fiddle. Just like, wow, I mean, this guy's a human being, he exists. And I could just march up and get my fiddle out and play a tune, play all the tunes that I learned off the record that he played on. And it was, and Byron was extremely kind and very helpful, and encouraging. My models, really for any mentorship I might do are pretty much Byron
Mm.
and then some of the great jazz educators as well.
Mm.
And Vassar, of course, was a lovely person who was
Yeah.
always positive and encouraging.
Totally. Yeah.
And he used to tease me a lot because I can read music, and
Uh-huh.
he didn't read music, and he just asked me well, what is an interval? Is it a thing? Is it a note? Well, he just
Yeah.
he tricked me, like he just take me out and go, oh well, that's it's like it's like not really a thing. It's like a distance between two notes.
Yeah. 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 Trippy.
He was just he was
Yeah.
good.
I wish I was old enough to, I met him when I was like 10 years old.
Oh, cool.
So, and he actually taught at the first Fiddle Week, which for those who don't know, that's something both Darryl and I have taught at, but it's one of the fiddle camps that we were alluding to earlier.
Yeah.
An amazing fiddle camp. But
Manoa, or was it?
it's one of no gathering, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Very first Fiddle Week, and he had a bright orange fiddle case. I remember. I think I was talking with Alex Hargraves was on. We were talking about Vassar, and Alex was talking about how distinctive his style is, and it got me thinking about how distinctive everything about him is. Like his hairstyle, his belt buckle was like the biggest belt buckle I'd ever seen. His fiddle case was like neon orange. You could see it from a mile away.
Yeah.
Just everything about him was just so Vassar, so distinctive.
Yeah.
Let's see, what else was I going to ask you? I wanted to. So, you started you're one of the co-founders of the Turtle Island Quartet, which has a foothold in a lot of different genres, but I think most people would probably think of them as a classically based quartet, just by virtue of being a string quartet. And then you listen to the quartet, and they do all this other stuff, of course. I just would like for you to comment a little bit about having a foothold in the classical world, since you consider yourself a fiddle player. or maybe you consider yourself a violinist too. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's funny because the fiddle players kind of think I might be a violinist, and the violinists all think I'm a fiddler.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty. I feel like I'm a fiddler because with the with classical violin, which I did study a little bit when I was a kid, enough to be able to read music, and now of course I do arranging and composing and all that classical stuff. But yeah, classical music, and there's something special. Really special. Oh, it's the classical music you play. Always play what you cannot play. You're always
Right.
trying to play what you cannot play. But with jazz and fiddling,
Yeah.
you only have to play what you can play. You
Right.
get to choose. You get kind of
What a relief.
so that's for me, I totally consider myself a fiddle player and never really I don't really even know that much about classical music really.
Mm.
And I think David Balakrishnan and I, who kind of pretty much started that thing,
Hmm.
and of course we couldn't have the string quartet until Mark Summers showed up, and then it became
Oh,
a real
okay.
thing, and then of course we had Irene Sazer
Yeah.
in on viola, who's a great classical violinist and great improvising violinist, just one of those just super free players who can do anything.
Hmm.
Um, but I don't think we ever the group got more classical as especially after I left. But we hired a guy when David had to leave the group temporarily. We hired this fellow Tracy Silverman who had the whole thing. It was all laid out for him. He debuted with the Chicago Symphony at the age of 13 and went to Juilliard and just
Oh.
completely rebelled against that and went to Minneapolis, started a grunge band, and
Wow.
the guy, not only doesn't know how good he is on violin, he doesn't care. He
Yeah. Yeah.
doesn't care.
Interesting.
He just wants to play music. So that was a great thing. So there was always that the idea that you're doing very intricate and complicated arrangements. Um, always, we were always trying to balance that with like completely, improvised sections or open sections or partly improvised sections where, there'd be an improvised bass line and then you might have, because some of the stuff we were playing mostly jazz for a while and then, kind of went into sort of a little bit poppier place. And then the new acoustic music thing like dog stuff, there was a little
Yeah.
bit of that. And then they got back into like adapting. Well, yeah, after I left, they did some really interesting adaptations of specific composers. I think my favorite one of those is, of course, the group that had Evan Price and
Mm.
Jeremy Kittle in it. They did
Mm.
the Coltrane
Mm.
tribute record, which is unbelievably, it's just mind-boggling. Hearing Evan play Coltrane solos note for note is it's a humbling experience, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And that was great. I mean, when I was with the group, there was always this element of like kind of just loose, groove. I mean, the groove thing. Mark and I kind of were able to really work together to really set up like a groove that nobody had ever done in
Mm.
string quartet music, and that's was kind of the point. And we,
Right.
so that um, the fact that the whole thing kind of came about. Well, David and I had been playing together a lot, and David would sit in with the David Grisman Quintet. If we needed, I
Mm.
was starting to write multiple violin parts and fun stuff that we would just do on if we had a show in town. And this was Mark was in the group at that point, so sometimes we just get me and Dave and Mark, and of course Mike Marshall plays fiddle fine and reads music,
That's
and
great. Yeah.
so we get these like four fiddle
Wow.
parties on stage. That was always fun. But David and I really had a kind of a affinity, and we both,
Yeah.
we had a lot of complementary skills. I had
Yeah.
all the groove stuff, and he had all this amazing, very advanced like jazz arranging skills and compositional
Mm.
things going. So it seemed natural to have some kind of project. And
Sure.
uh,
Do you notice? Sorry if you wanted to say more. I had a question.
okay.
Do you notice at all, kind of? I don't know at what point they ever departed, but if they did, are you noticing like a merger of the violin and fiddle worlds nowadays? Like,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's coming on. Yeah, it's like coming on great. I mean, so many people that are really good classical violinists are able to, flip over into, yeah. It people are really not confusing style with content so much anymore.
mm,
And that's what we used to get. The classical violinists say, "Oh, you're not vibrating enough." And that's just
mm,
a style thing.
right, right, right.
And or the classical, I mean, well, those guys don't have any groove. Well, there's a groove. It's just
Yeah, yeah,
there's lots of different kinds of groove. There's a breath groove. There's a heart groove. There's a nerve groove. There's like a brain groove, which
yeah, yeah, yeah,
kind of corresponds to pitch in a way. But pitch is also a groove because
yeah.
vibrations and rhythmic vibrations.
If you look at the sine wave, I mean, it looks
Right.
like a groove.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you really, I mean, and this is something that some of the Indian musicians have pointed out to me. It's like you start with this, and then double that, and then double that again, and then double that again, and then
Yeah.
it becomes a note.
Oh wow, yeah.
Actually, there's a website that shows this very clearly. It's like clicks, 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 and then it doubles, and it's faster and faster, and then all of a sudden the clicks become 60 cycle hum, and then
Wow.
right up to it's it's a continuum, and that's what that just
Yeah,
blows my mind.
that is very cool.
It's beautiful.
I just on this subject of violin and fiddle, one thing that I've noticed, I don't know when this started, but I've noticed not just classical musicians coming to fiddle music, but a lot more, we'll say, traditional musicians going to classical music. I mean, it's almost like Bach's partitas have become standards in the fiddle
Yeah.
repertoire, or just Bach in general.
Partita number 6, number 1. It's the greatest fiddle tune ever written.
It really is.
Yes, it's a polska for God's sake. It's so amazing.
It really is, man. I got my book of partitas just over there. Um,
Yeah.
so I don't want this to go on too long. I always say it's going to be 30 minutes, but I'd like to open it up to questions for everyone that's here in the Zoom or watching on Facebook or Instagram. I'm actually going to open up my Facebook just in case there are questions. And I will say, normally my wife is helping us out, like scanning these different platforms, looking for questions and feeding them to us. But she's feeding our baby at the moment. So she's
Well,
kind of
it's-
occupied. Yeah. Um, let me scroll through the Instagram feed here, see if we have any questions for Darol. Marco Zambello, tudo bem? We had a lot of people from Brazil tuned in. A lot of fiddlers I'm seeing. Awesome. Let's see. Well, I'll ask you the question that I know my wife wants to ask you because she asks every single person that's on this question.
Okay, it's a
Which,
test.
and you can probably read into this knowing that we have a little girl who hears a lot of fiddle music in the house, even with only her 5 days of life. What age did you start learning fiddle?
Oh, okay. So I think I started when I was about 9 or 10, something like that. No, 12. Because
12. Wow.
the Beatles, I was born in '53, and the Beatles came in 1964, and that was when I got interested in music. Was from the Beatles, and I wanted to play guitar. And
Yeah.
parents bought me a guitar, which was pretty much not really playable by humans. They didn't know, and back then you couldn't just get a cheap, nice guitar. You had to get a
Mm.
cheap, bad guitar. So, and then a friend of the family, we were in a restaurant, and I was, some guy was like strolling tables. He was the strolling violinist, and he came up to the table, and he was like having a great time. He was playing all this stuff, and looked cool, and it sounded cool, and he was smiling, and he said, "Man, that looks a lot easier than the guitar." That was my second mistake. So
Yeah, right.
yeah. So yeah, a friend of the family had a violin, and we were given the
Okay.
violin. I just kind of got into it, and I had no idea. Didn't connect it with any other kind of music but classical because that was what you studied. And I was going to take lessons because that's how you learn.
Right.
Yeah.
I have a question that just inspired another question on behalf of a lot of adult learners. Because I would say most of my students are adults, and many of them are adults who are either relearning the fiddle or have just started learning it in retirement or later in life. What advice or words of consolation, inspiration, whatever you want to call it, would you give to older learners of the violin?
Yeah. I would say that um, you really, it's important to try to find ways to enjoy the process even from the beginning. And in order to do that, sometimes you have to expand your standards. This is really important. I think that we're it's one of the things about learning the violin is that trying to produce a good sound. The
Mm,
good sound
yeah,
approach where we just want right. We just want that nice sound, but there are other sounds that if and it comes from all different styles of music. If for instance, this might not be considered good for Haydn or
right,
Handel or Mozart, but if you're on stage, with some guys with makeup and smoke pots and like electric guitars and everything, that's probably the most appropriate sound you could make. So
sounds like you got a distortion pedal on that thing.
exactly, and that's easy.
Right.
Also, those kind of the wispy kind of that kind
Yeah.
of stuff.
Yeah.
Just having a wider palette at the beginning is going to be it's just going to increase your enjoyment because yeah, you're not trying to like it's it's like when you teach your kid to walk, you don't teach him on a tightrope. You put
Right.
him on a rug, and he's got the whole room. Right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's can be a more satisfying way to approach the instrument.
Mm,
You're just starting, especially as adults, when it takes much longer time to do anything, um, anything new. It just takes longer. And so if we can,
yeah.
rather than get depressed about like how hard it is to do that,
Mm,
just be exploring other avenues of tone production as well as obviously we want to be able to do that, and that's going to happen,
mm,
but it's going to take a while. And so in the meantime, let's have some fun with this thing. What else can we do?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. So that's a lot of that is in my fiddle school we talk about that a lot, and we joke around. It's just, yeah, this stuff can be music is if music's not funny, then something's wrong. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. That's great advice. I love the analogy about the tightrope, teaching your kid to walk. I'm gonna steal that.
Cool. All
I'm gonna
right.
remember that.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
great.
that's useful. Yeah, I mean, you don't even have to steal it. I'm giving it
Oh, thanks, Darol.
to.
Uh, well, let's see. No questions yet. Let me just check Facebook. There's a lot of people who
Anybody
just
out there? Is anybody out there? Hello.
yeah. There's quite a few people. There's quite a few people on Instagram and Facebook.
Oh, cool. Okay, because I'm
I
just seeing
see.
5 participants here on the Zoom thing.
Mhm.
But
I
yeah.
always put the Zoom link. Um, I always put the Zoom link up on my Facebook so people can join the actual meeting if they want. And actually, there's a lot of people who aren't on Facebook that sometimes join, so I send
Uh-huh.
that out on my newsletters. But
Yeah.
um,
Cool.
I mean, if there's no burning questions, I suppose we can adjourn here. But Darol, what can people look forward to? I mean, do you have like a project you're working on or an album or anything like
As a matter
that?
of fact, I do. I have a couple of projects. It's funny you should ask. Thank you for asking.
Tell
And
us about him.
I'm actually curious about your projects too. I mean, obviously you've just produced another human being, but I'm sure you have some musical things that are going on too. I myself am I'm embarking on for a lot of people really like that Diary of a Fiddler record I put out about 15 years ago.
I love that record.
And that was, I just got together with a lot of, really great fiddle players, and we just made some music and then just put it all together. And I would like to do the Return of the Son of Diary of a Fiddler with all those beautiful young people that I have worked with. Um,
Oh, wow.
People like Brittany Haas
Yeah.
and Jeremy Kittle, and I actually already have something with Alex Hargreaves. Um, so this is something that is going to be require me to be in a room with all these
Hmm.
folks,
Right.
Bronwyn, Keith Hines, just Jenna Jenna Moynihan.
Yeah.
It's a big list. It's
Yeah.
maybe 20 or 30 people, and
Wow.
I'm sure the more I think about it, the Claridges, and the more I think about it, the bigger it's going to get. So
Yeah, of course.
maybe those tunes will have to be pretty short, but whatever it is, it's just I'm really excited about that. That's the one thing I'm kind of excited about is that just, and maybe it'll be the tunes I write, or maybe we'll write something together on the spot, or whatever it is. It'll be um, kind of a little bit of a love fest, and I get to, it's an excuse to go and see, visit, and hang
Yeah,
out.
of course.
Eat the
So
food.
you'll record it on location with those respective fiddlers wherever they are.
Yeah, yeah. I
Cool.
have a fancy car that can tow a trailer, and I have the trailer. And I'm
Important.
kind of on a odyssey across the country, across the U.S. right now. Anyway, obviously with COVID and everything, that's probably not the time to really dive into this. But I've already recorded a pretty interesting track um, with all 24 of the people that I really want to play with. Um,
Oh, wow.
where it's just one of those things where I recorded a basic track on the octave violin. It's Little Liza Jane, and it's sort of
Uh-huh.
in second line New Orleans second line style, so it's kind of slow. It's also, I don't know if anybody's played Liza Jane in E flat. Well, probably the trumpet players have,
Yeah.
but no fiddle players.
Uh-huh.
So maybe that's a world premiere.
First time for
Anyway,
everything.
so I've this was a kind of long distance thing, so I sent out this basic track to
Okay.
all these folks,
Mm.
and they overdubbed, but nobody got to hear anybody else but me. So it's kind of nobody knows what anybody else is doing, and I haven't
Wow.
assembled the whole thing yet. But there may be like 5 or 6 different mixes depending on who. Yeah, one thing Mike Barnett recently had a very serious medical
Yeah.
episode, but right before that happened, he overdubbed an incredible fiddle part on this track that I'm talking about, and
Mhm.
yeah, so that's pretty intense,
Yeah.
That's so there
Absolutely.
may be like multiple mixes of this thing. I
He's
definitely
he's
go.
making progress though. I don't know if you
He's
follow
making
the Facebook
incredible
group.
progress. It's so
Yeah.
exciting, and anybody that is interested in fiddling and knows about Michael should really check out his there's a site, and I believe there's a GoFundMe site or something like
Yeah.
that, because
Yeah.
medical bills are well, we
I
all
can
know that.
include a link to that in the YouTube
That would be
when I
great.
when I post this video for sure.
Yeah.
So should people go to your site to learn more about that?
Yeah, I believe I have something up. It's darylanger.com. And of course, I have a Facebook page. I have a couple of places. I have like a pro Facebook page, and then like
Mm.
I have a personal page where
Cool.
but the pro page, I think, I always post the musical stuff and no, political opinions. Yeah, so I
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
to darylangerfiddler.com if you're just interested in fiddling.
Right.
Um,
We
And
have
then
a
I'm trying to figure out the Instagram thing. It's not that hard. It seems to be pretty straightforward if I can just keep the thing on my phone long enough to post something. And
You've
thank you,
got
Andrew.
some, you know, I don't know if it's because it's Halloween season, but there seems to be some Instagram juju
Oh,
going on with your phone, and app
yeah.
keeps disappearing. Someone has definitely got a little Daryl voodoo doll somewhere with
Well, whatever's going on with that,
Instagram.
whatever. It's fine. I'm.
We,
What? Yeah.
speaking of Instagram, we had a question just come in. So before we go, we'll take this question. This is Marcos in Brazil. Actually, he asks, "How is your process to absorbing new links and phrases to your vocabulary? Because you have,"
Ah,
he says, because you play different styles, you write the links. I think by links he means maybe licks.
licks and phrases. Yeah, links to licks and phrases. Yeah. Sorry about this English
And
business.
he
English.
also asks about your process to study improvisation. So there's a few questions here, but
Yeah.
um, yeah, absorbing new licks, how you study improvisation, adding new vocabulary.
Well, um, you know, if I'm feeling stale and like I'm playing the same five things over and over and over again, uh, I will listen around in the style that I'm currently playing and find something that I love, somebody else's solo.
Hmm.
And then I transcribe the solo, and then I sort of learn the solo, but mostly what I want to do is, take the things out of the solo that I've never played before, like a lick, yeah,
Hmm.
or a melody, a little, piece of the solo,
Hmm.
because I'm very opinionated. I don't, I can't make myself learn a whole solo just because it's a complete thing. But it's usually some stuff I hate in the solo and some stuff I love. So I just take the melody that I have never played, and I take that and I try to isolate it. Find where's the end, where's the beginning, and then I put it find ways. How what's the fingering that feels the most natural? What's the fingering that feels like I would improvise this?
Hmm.
There are usually like maybe two ways that, like, oh, my fingers just want to play it this way. And
Hmm.
so finding two is really good, out of the probably the four ways,
Yeah,
because we have four fingers.
right.
Um, we can orient a lick to, four different
Hmm.
shapes,
Right.
right? So I like to get about two different shapes that really feel great, and then play that lick in every key all over the neck until I'm just sick of it completely. And then I'll do it with maybe two or three other melodies. But um, yeah, that's how I do it. I'm very slow progress.
Hmm.
And as far as improvising, I think that one of the things that has helped me the most in improvising is a very simple exercise called diatonically occurring arpeggios, which
Hmm.
in which you make a three or a four note arpeggio on each note of a scale. So, and there we go. Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So this is like I compare this to like if you say, "Oh, my stomach's kind of like getting big,"
Uh-huh.
so
Yeah.
I'm gonna do sit-ups. I'm gonna do crunches, every day for a month.
Yeah.
And so imagine that you actually succeed in doing that.
Hmm.
So there are unexpected returns because it just doesn't make your stomach smaller. Your back gets better. Your breathing improves.
Right.
Your posture's better. Things. All these other things happen, and it's the same thing with this particular exercise. I
Hmm.
think you become much more confident about playing in a particular key after doing these very simple arpeggios through
Hmm.
through a major scale, because what you're doing
Yeah.
really, right, Andrew, is you're iterating through the modes. You're playing
Sure.
all the
Yeah. Yeah. I was just,
as
that's the first thing I thought of. Yeah.
yeah.
Do you practice those diatonically because of the kind of music you play, or Do you mess with like
Yeah, I
melodic
mean,
minor as
the
well and
music
stuff?
that I play is somewhat diatonic. Now, I also practice them on the melodic minor scale, which is a
Yeah.
very important scale for dominant based, which is swing and, a
Hmm.
lot of Brazilian music, for sure.
Yeah.
Uh, and, just pretty much any kind of Western music which has like dominant structure, like 5/1, 5/1,
Hmm.
It's also 1/4,
Yeah.
all that stuff. So that kind of uh, so your five chord, your dominant chord is where there's the most color available to you. That still sounds like music. It sounds like you can justify just about any note in a dominant chord in some way. You can say, "Oh, that's a raised eight," or like a,
Yeah. Totally.
so it's like that minor third against the major chord. Oh, that's a sharp nine. It's like
Yeah.
almost anything is
Right.
cool.
No, absolutely. I should mention Marcus, who asked the question here, is he's part of the small but enthusiastic and growing contingent of American music players in Brazil.
That
And
is cool because there is a very growing contingent and very enthusiastic, of which I am a member of the American players who are interested in Brazilian music,
yeah,
especially choros and chorinhos,
right.
that style, which I think is so close to swing and fiddle tunes. It, yeah,
It's funny you say that because we were talking about Bach kind of making a comeback on the American music scene. I feel like Brazilian choro has over the last 20 years just exploded over here.
oh, totally. And you're such a great example of that, Andrew. You're such a great choro player, and you
Oh, thank you.
so great with the Brazilian music, and really, you're farther than anybody, I think, as far as the American fiddle players. You've really, taken it to a beautiful level. I would
Oh, well,
recommend
thank you.
anybody who's interested in fiddling at all and in Brazilian music, check in with Andrew's website.
You know,
So,
for me, it was kind of like it was just it was sort of by accident. I mean, I moved to Brazil because of a woman, and then I was like, well, I want to play music, but no one here plays American music or Irish music or even jazz, really. So I guess I'll learn their music, and then
yeah,
fell down the
but
rabbit hole. You know how that
so
story.
full of beauty and certainly, as far as just lots of notes and very very fiddly in that way.
It is. It's very fiddly.
So much of it was written on mandolin.
Right. Exactly. I should mention that Duncan Wickle just joined, and
Ah,
Duncan
Duncan, man. Hey.
Duncan's another protege of yours.
Well, I don't know. I think Duncan has always been a very independent sort of musician who just, yeah, I remember him coming. He was at Berkeley he supposedly tried to study with me, but I ran out of stuff to show him. He was so far ahead of me. All we do was jam on
Right.
Brazilian chorus. We
Yeah.
learned chorus later. So Duncan's a great. He's an inventor. He invented another way to strap your fiddle on.
The
In case you're
Wickle buckle.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was a very ingenious thing that he's
For
got going.
for folks watching, you should go to Duncan's website. I think it's duncanwickle.com. He can correct me here in the Instagram chat if I'm wrong, but you can learn all about the Wickle buckle. Patent pending. I think the patent is in, right?
Yeah,
But it's an
well,
amazing way to hold your fiddle, and it allows you to sing as you play, and
buckle that wickle. Yeah.
that's right. Duncan told me a funny story about going to like these garbage dumps, you know, and he's like, I'm here to get as many seat buckles as you have," and just these like good old boys looking at him like, "Why do you want seat buckles?" And you can tell the story later. Duncan's actually going to be on this musician's workbench
Cool.
in a few weeks. I don't remember the date, but well, thank you so much, Daryl. This has been an absolute joy, and it's great to catch up with you and see you and
Yeah,
um,
it's a
hear your
blast.
wisdom.
I love geeking out on fiddle, and Andrew, you're doing a great service here, and it's just really fun to get together and yeah, connect in this way. And yeah, thanks for making it happen. And
Of course, yeah.
and if you want to, anybody's interested in further ranting from me, you can go to the artistworks.com site, Darol Anger Fiddle at Artistworks, or
Mhm.
Artistworks at Darol Anger, or something like that. You put them all together on, just throw them up on Google, and it'll generate, it'll get you wherever you need to go. And,
Awesome. There'll be a link to that in the YouTube video when this posts, so for folks to learn more. Darol, I'll keep you informed about some of my projects. You had asked about them, but I didn't want to.
Yeah,
I didn't want to spend too much time on me.
well, it's
But
yeah.
good luck on your journey. You're on this amazing cross country trek, and
Yeah,
can't wait to
yeah,
hear this album.
yeah. Yes, a great, beautiful record. Also, just produced and arranged and engineered and played a little bit on Ethan Setioan, a great mandolin player,
Yeah,
fantastic mandolinist.
it's great.
That's been great with a bunch of just super super intelligent alien musicians. Less than 30 years old. Actually, myself and Tony Trischka also played on a few things. And
Oh, cool.
so yeah, it's like a very wide age range, ranging from
I'd love to have Tony on. Yeah, Tony's great. Tony's great. Well, we're gonna sign off here. I apologize if you just joined us, but I told Darol that it was only going to be 30 minutes or something, and he has a busy cross-country road trip to get back to. So,
well, this has been a wonderful, interlude in that. It's nice to just sit in one place and geek out on fiddle.
absolutely. I mean, I could do this for hours, but
Thanks, Andrew.
yeah,
Great.
Darol, it's been great. Thank you so much. I'm gonna end the Facebook Live here.